Joining me now are Melissa Murray, a professor at NYU School of Law, and Philip Bump. He is a national columnist for the Washington Post. Folks, thank you for being here. Philip, we talk a lot about what Donald Trump has planned for a second term. And there's a lot of, there are some big statements and proclamations, but a lot of question marks. One thing that seems quite certain is that a for sale sign is hanging outside the White House, just in terms of the business people that he has brought in who could make very, very lucrative decisions for themselves, helming government agencies. Can you talk a little bit about the way in which this is all happening in broad daylight?
I think something that's coming into focus, and was very obvious over the course of the campaign, is that something shifted. And maybe it was the fact that he tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election and got away with it. Maybe it was the fact that he, took in millions of dollars, his private company did. The Democrats in the House put out a report detailing the millions of dollars that the Trump organization took in from foreign governments when he was president. But he is unabashed in a way that he wasn't 8 years ago, right? Back then, he at least paid lip service to the idea that presidents don't do these things. But in the same way that everything else got thrown out the window, that got thrown out the window too. Yeah. And he's not even saying that he's going to pretend to do these things. He's just saying, hey, buy the guitars. Hey, buy the Bibles. Hey, just straight throw money in his pocket.
Wheeling and dealing.
Exactly. And, the idea that past presidents would have been limited because they don't want the impressions that you get from a Sun deal where you're getting all this money and people are questioning your ethics. He doesn't worry about that. Everyone's questioning his ethics anyway with good reason. So why even worry about that?
Why bother and just make the cash? I mean, Jimmy Carter, I think, put his peanut farm into a blind trust, Melissa. The peanut farm is not the same thing as the Trump organization.
Yes.
It's yes. Remember when we talked about the emoluments clause back in Trump 1, and it was like, you can't have a hotel where foreign dignitaries are going to stay and spend money because that might just be the same thing as funneling money into Donald Trump's pockets. That entire debate has gone the way of the dodo bird. There doesn't seem to be any legal implications for any of this.
Well, so, again, the first Trump administration was kind of a boon for constitutional law professors. We got to look at all kinds of provisions of the Constitution that had previously gone unobserved, like the emoluments clause. But there were a number of lawsuits filed under the emoluments clause because of these apparently conflicts of interest with Donald Trump's business dealings and his role as president, and the prohibition in the Constitution that you cannot receive benefits from foreign entities nor domestic entities when you're serving as president. It's the original anti-corruption clause. Yeah. It's right there in the Constitution. A lot of those lawsuits became moot when Donald Trump lost the election in 2020, so they were never actually conclusively settled. And now, as you say, we have a president-elect who's emboldened because nothing happened. We also have an environment where this kind of graft seems to have become normalized. So I know I come on your show all the time and I can't stop talking about the Supreme Court. I'm going to talk about the Supreme Court again.
You're right. It is an extension of that culture. It is an extension
of this. We have normalized this. There have been reports about the emotional support billionaires, about Justice Thomas receiving gifts, quite substantial gifts from friends, including boarding school tuition payments on his mother's house. And it's become so routinized that it's become normalized. And so if you were Donald Trump, why would you be concerned? Because it seems like the entire government is just awash in this at this point.
Well, and the defiance is the de facto position. I don't care, and therefore
and there are no
care.
Consequences.
I do wonder, Doge went to Capitol Hill today. First of all, congratulations, Elon Musk, on getting everyone to say the word Doge all the time. And the internet meme has just become our life. That's one of the things we can be looking more forward to in this Trump 2. But I mean, the idea that he's going to go out there and really change the regulatory infrastructure to directly benefit his own companies, again, it's not a secret why he's doing it. Mike Johnson's out there being his #1 cheerleader. And I do wonder whether Republicans are not fully clocking how controversial this may be in terms of setting aside Elon Musk's desire to grift off the system, the things Elon Musk wants to do to the rest of the federal government may not sit well with people who are actually in the actual government.
Yeah, I mean, this has been sort of the tension within the Republican Party. The old Republican Party, the pre-Trump Republican Party, was always, the Paul Ryan types who were saying, we're going to cut federal, government spending until people started hearing from constituents, and then, things got a little iffier. So that is it's sort of refreshing that we get to go back to that era of Republican politics, right? But, you know, the thing that I think is really striking about this external organization that they've put together is that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy very obviously don't understand what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
They say things like, oh, we're just going to, you know, just cut people by the Social Security number, or, you know, we're going to cut $2 trillion, a third of the federal budget, because it's just insane. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. But what they do know about is the things that benefit Elon Musk and benefit big business. And those are the things they're going to protect. And I think that for any elected official who is responsible to constituents to fail to understand that they quite literally only understand the things that benefit them is going to be a huge problem for them politically down the line.
Well, I also just want, I mean, if you're Rivian, which is an electric car company that has a vested interest in these electric vehicle tax credits that Elon Musk seeks to do away with because it helps competitors and hurts, well, it at least doesn't help Tesla, there are going to be lawsuits, right? I mean, you've got to imagine that the competitors are going to be like, wait a second, dude, you can't just do this as head of Doge or whatever.
I mean, there are likely to be lawsuits. They are likely to be received by perhaps a more conservative judiciary. So, I mean, again, this has all been sort of laid out. I'm reminded, though, of when you went to Michigan, Alex, to talk to those working class union voters and how what they wanted was a government that worked for them. And they felt the Biden administration was not working for them. And we saw on election night, even in ruby red states, there were a number of states where paid family leave measures passed. Again, sort of classic redistribution, working class issues. They want government that works for them. And what we're seeing, and again, I think the question is going to be in the messaging, is how do you show these people that working for Elon Musk, working for Vivek Ramaswamy is actually working for you, when in fact it may just be working for them. That's the gap. And again, you know, we talked about this when you showed those clips. Like, how are you on board for the party that for 8 years of 9 different election cycles, or 8 election cycles, has run the son of a millionaire or an actual millionaire, and now we have a whole government
full of
oligarchs and billionaires.
Billionaires.
Like, how is that working for working class people? So I think there is going to be a real misalignment with where the voters were in this election and perhaps what we're going to see from this administration.
Well, and then when it comes to cutting all this wasteful government spending, which, you know, is far more complicated, they're not going to touch Social Security, they're not going to touch Medicare. Like, they're not going to, but they're going to have to touch all these programs if they're going to get rid of, they're going to slash federal spending. They can't, the Social Security number, like cutting people, firing people who have a Social Security number beginning in an odd number is not a feasible plan for restructuring the government. And then there are the Republican congressmen who have projects and like some of the government spending. I just foresee a massive break between what Trump and his party can withstand politically and the giant promises and the bluster coming from people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk.
Yeah, so 2 things. The first is that there's a lot of focus on federal employees because they're very easy targets. It makes up about 4% of federal spending, actual, like, paying those employees about 4%. So if you're cutting a third of it, you're not going to get very far with that. But the second thing is, it's really important distinction, particularly now that he's not going to be able to run again. It's important to distinguish between what's good for Trump and what's good for the party.
Right.
Trump never cares what's good for the party. He has never cared what's good for the party. The party has incidentally benefited at times from his leadership and his ability to turn out his voters, but he doesn't care. Right? Like, what's going to happen in those situations is those Republicans are going to come to Trump and be like, hey, we've got a problem with this. And in a worst case scenario, he's going to say, okay, well, what businesses are going to contribute to my super PAC, you know, that I can then use to pay my legal bills, right? Like that's the worst case scenario, but it's by no means outside the realm of possibility. And meanwhile, the Republicans are getting stuck holding the bag, right?
Totally.
If all this goes south, the Republicans are going to be the ones held accountable, and Donald Trump is going to go back down to Mar-a-Lago after his term's over, you know, in a best case scenario.
Yes.
And, you know, what does he care?
He is a lame duck president as of January 20th, right? And the reality is that Republicans Congress, we remember what the government shutdown looked like under Donald Trump. A dysfunctional federal government does not do well for the party in charge. And that is what we are barreling towards, with not only a cabinet of people that don't really care about the democratic principles or the people, but also someone in charge who's just, like, they don't have the experience, there's not the expertise, and there's not the concern. So where does that leave us? I mean, I don't know. I think the implications for the party, Melissa, as you point out, are vast in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, this was a change election. Anti-incumbency around the world is on the rise, and this election was no different. I think even if you look here at New York City, where, many parts of the city went red, I don't know if it's because there's a mandate for Donald Trump, but I think there is some skepticism of blue governance. Why do we pay so many taxes and the services are so negligible? Why does the subway feel unsafe? Even if it isn't actually unsafe, why does it feel like that? Why can't I get more for what I'm paying? They want a reason to believe in government again. I don't know if this is it.
Yeah. Doge, isn't it? Why do I?
That's
why
like
do
a
I
faculty committee. It's not a real department. It's a faculty committee.
Melissa Murray and Philip Bump, thank you guys for joining me tonight.